Hello there. Alright, my Kenobi beard tutorial went over so well that today I'm going to show you how to make the hair to go with it. For this build, I used EVA Foam, super glue, hot glue, paint, high ground, a completely replaceable droid sidekick, just swapping a new dome, safety gear, sanding tools, scissors, razor pens, and a box cutter. First, I figured out a pattern using a high-tech, complex template patterning app. I just eyeballed it. Figured it out in cardboard and scrap foam first before I made all my mistakes on the good material. Those apps didn't exist when I started, so I just gotten used to doing it in real life, you know? Reference material. Which is my excuse to binge Clone Wars on company time. But no, I'm not watching cartoons, I'm doing research. Yes, lots of sophisticated research. Look out, Obi, it's Cyborg Darth Maul! And this is what I came up with. So let's go ahead and transfer that flat shape to a flat but flexible material, such as EVA foam. Nobody saw that coming. Guys, I have to do these reads as if this is the first video you've ever seen, so bear with me, subscribers. We were all new at this at one point or another. While I normally use standard gray EVA foam, today I'll be using khaki EVA foam in order to save a step during the painting process. Khaki EVA foam is just the base color underneath the wood panel laminate floor mats that you can find in hardware stores and home goods stores, also online. I started, as always, by cutting off the puzzle pieces. This is just that it doesn't get snagged in all the little odds and ends just out of frame. It's easier for me to work with it that way. And then I trace the pattern onto the foam. I'm using a brown Sharpie because it will blend easier with the final color. Although that's really just a precaution. If you're using a template, then you should always cut inside the lines, on the inner edge I mean. Otherwise your final product will come out slightly too big. I numbered these as I went so that I didn't lose track of what order they go in around the outside of the head. See, they look similar, but they gradually change their shape and size as you go around. I weighted the floor mats down with machinist blocks so the foam doesn't slide around while I'm working. For the most part, these pieces won't actually be touching. There'll be small gaps in between them, so there's nowhere for the glue to hang on to, making the whole thing wildly unstable. Because of this, I'll need to make a surface for them to rest on. For that surface, I'm going to use a helmet pattern from one of my many sci-fi helmet builds. This one is for a basic helmet dome. This is a size under what I would normally use for my trooper helmets, hence no stock footage. I did this so that the helmet would sit directly against my head with no wiggle room. If I were to build a full helmet from this pattern, it wouldn't fit me. I can get away with this because unlike a helmet, a hairpiece has no faceplate for my nose to get in the way of. Once those were all drawn on, I cut out the pieces with my razor pen, which I continually sharpen on a sharpening block. Some of the edges I know I'm gonna have to sand later on, no matter what I do, so I just use scissors for those. It's a little bit more convenient. And dead air. Dead air, dead air, dead air. Alright, you get it. Let's speed this up a bit. Ooh-wee, look at him go! Drop in Benny Hill soundtrack. Wish I had the rights to that. Support me on Patreon so I can afford music rights. When the pieces were all separated from each other, I trimmed off the flash. Just so the new people know, I keep sharpening my knife because the foam dulls it out very quickly over time, but like over not much time at all. Really over the length of a cut, so over distance in inches. Freedom units! Also it's W40, not water. It's like the opposite of water. Would that be fire? Do you remember? Once the pieces were cut out, I had to remove the faux wood pattern on the other side, which is easier said than done, but it is absolutely necessary, otherwise it'll create horrific problems later on. It'll melt if you try to heat form or sand your piece, your glue won't stick, it's just a nightmare. This actually came off easier than the last time I did this, but I still needed to start a few corners using my box cutter. Also, as I do this, I'm adding back my notations so that I know where they go. I forgot one piece, so gonna have to use process of elimination. Not so hard with one mistake, but can you imagine if I didn't catch that in time? Tearing my hair out and then immediately replace it with foam hair. You better watch your back, keeps. They're not gonna sponsor me. Once all the pieces are taken care of, I cleaned up some of the rough edges on my belt sander. Rotary tool will also work. I'm wearing a respirator mask as I do this, because the dust gets everywhere and you don't want to breathe it in. The edges of the dome need to be totally flat in order to line up correctly. The edges of the hair segments, however, will be rounded in order to create a slightly more organic feel. After all the pieces were sanded, I heat formed them with my heat gun. As the name suggests, the heat gun can get really hot. Go figure. So to keep it away from my increasingly shop-scarred hands, I skewered it with a kebab skewer. Heated it up on both sides, taking much more time on the inward-facing one than the outward-facing side, just in case I go too long and cause a burn mark. Don't want that to be visible, although I am going to paint over it. That's a good habit to have. Then I pressed them onto a rounded surface in order to shape them. After that, I stuck the still hot pieces in various round bowl-shaped forms for a few minutes to cool down. Doesn't take very long. Takes about as much time to cool down as it took to heat up. But to be on the safe side, I gave it twice that. When they were cool enough to hold on to that curved shape, I removed them from the forms and glued them together with contact cement. Contact cement gives off toxic flammable fumes, which I'm so bored of saying. I've said it in a million videos, but I have to say it because no one reads the label. Normally you want to do this outside, but it's too cold for the glue to dry properly, so guess I'm gonna settle for the second floor bathroom, which has a vent fan, and I never use it anyway, so I can't imagine it being an issue. By the way, I'm over applying the glue here. Normally, it's not as viscous and you don't want to use this much. Like, using this much could cause the seam to partially come apart, but this contact cement is like one pandemic old. It's past its shelf life. And once you open up a can of contact cement, its shelf life plummets. And even though there's half a can left, it's only got about another month to live. I let it sit for a few minutes, and when the glue became tacky, I attached the pieces. Then I let it sit to air out overnight. In the meantime, I heat formed all the hair pieces, just like I did for the dome. The next morning, when I was absolutely certain the glue was dry, I reheated it to further even out any lumpy areas. Then I did a test fitting. From that, I determined where the cartoon hairline would line up. Once that was figured out, I cut off the excess along that line, thus forming a skull cap, similar to the Jaffa helmets from Stargate SG-1. That theme song is going to be in my head all day long. Audio disabled for copyright, and also viewers' ears. In Clone Wars animation, however, this would read as a buzz cut. So we're gonna have to add to it. Kenobi's animated hair is conveniently divided into segments. Conveniently, unique New York. The swan swam across the sea. Kenobi's animated hair is conveniently divided into segments, almost as if individual strands of hair are hard to animate. Huh. So I placed those around the perimeter, attaching them lightly with superglue. Trying not to go crazy here with the glue, just in case I need to adjust these later on. See, these all have to go in a row and more or less line up. So if you make a mistake in the beginning, that's gonna translate all the way down the line, getting worse as you go. So, you know, no pressure. Okay, so it looks done right here, but just to hide the internal structure, I have to put another insert in the front, in between the dome and the frontmost hair segment. I guess that would be the bangs. Well, no, that's only if they're cut short, right? God, I need to hire a stylist. No, that looks really cool. That looks great. I love that. I love how that looks. Except it's too blonde, so I'm gonna paint over it with raw sienna. I lightly hot glued it to a styrofoam dummy head. This will also serve as a painting rig. I'm using a paintbrush instead of a sprayer here because the brush strokes go a long way towards simulating hair texture, in particular with Clone Wars, because their animation texture style was paintbrush strokes, so perfect. Now, this looks super weird without the beard. Looks like cartoon me, like cartoon teenage me. What would I say to cartoon teenage me? Nothing! Lived an awesome life! Don't want to change that. Don't change the past. Sound of Thunder, man! Or that one episode of That 70s Show. Was Newman in that episode? Or was that just a false memory? Okay, now the way this looks is pretty good, but that front segment isn't quite lining up. It's just a little bit too much space between that and the one just behind it, and I can see seams through it. So, I'll have to fill that in with scrap material. Originally, I was going to use a half-bevel scrap foam piece left over from the flamethrower build, the Ripley flamethrower build, not the generic McCready flamethrower build. Too specific! And, you know, that would have worked, but I found this offcut from one of the foam hair pieces that was just perfect. So I went with that instead. To get it to sit at the correct height, I inserted several pieces of scrap foam inside of it just for it to rest on. Then I lightly hot glued the insert in place. And that was it for the hair piece. The beard, I covered in another video. That'll be linked along with the templates, but essentially in a nutshell, it's more EVA foam crafting. I think the only thing I did differently was heat forming the cut lines. Yeah, that's the only thing new I brought to the table in that video. I super glued one side of the beard to the hair piece, and the other side is pinned in place. They're also straps, but in retrospect, they're kind of irrelevant, just no longer necessary when you're doing the full costume. The irony of wearing the animated hair, though, is that it forces you to cut your normal hair short, so I'm going to have to do something drastic. Do your worst. Now, when I said your worst, now I'm ready to destroy some cartoon robots from the high ground. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this short tutorial. It was made possible by my patrons, whose names are scrolling by. If you're feeling generous, then feel free to join them in the link down below. If not, that's cool. Totally cool. I get it. If you're just trying to build this mask and it's not quite coming out right, then there's also a link to the template that I used down in the video description as well. I think that's just about it, so consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell icon so that you never miss a build, checking out the back catalog if you're new to the channel, because there are a lot of builds in there, like Obi-Wan's armor, for instance. And let me know what other props you'd like to see me make in comments down below. Thanks again, happy crafting, see you later!